Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Healing Doesn't Have to Be Heavy podcast. I'm your host, Angie Berrett, and I am a trauma informed coach. I am a play expert. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also a child abuse survivor. As I was on my journey healing from years of child abuse, I felt the weight and the heaviness of having to slog through the trauma and healing, and it felt oppressive and lonely, and I just didn't see any hope. And then I found play and movement, and that really changed my healing pathway. And now I'm at a place where I get to work with women, helping them use play and movement to connect to their bodies, releasing limiting self beliefs, stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma, bringing more joy and fun into their lives. And this podcast is an extension of that. I get to talk to amazing people who have had their own incredible journeys and who get to share their nuggets of information and wisdom that they found on their journeys and hopefully help you find some inspiration to find some lightness, some joy, and some not so heaviness on your healing journey. And today's guest is an amazing epitome of that. And I'm so excited for y'all to meet her. And before I introduce her, I just want to give a trigger warning. We are going to be talking today about substance abuse, addictions, some suicidal ideations and suicidal thoughts. So if you find yourself getting triggered, definitely please step back, do whatever you need to do, ground down, come back to yourself. And then I really invite you to come back and finish this episode because our guest today has an incredible story and an amazing way that she helped herself heal and recover. And she's got an incredible, incredible story. So I really invite you to come back and listen to the rest of the episode when you feel ready, but take care of yourself first. So let me introduce you to today's guest. I'm so excited to jump into this with her, Amanda McNeil. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Angie.
Oh, I'm so excited. So, Amanda, tell us about you, who you are, and, tell us about you.
Yeah, I have been sober for 9.5 years from alcohol. Alcohol was my only substance of choice, although I also been sober. I don't actually know the exact number of years I have been sober from self-injury, but I succeeded at that a few years before alcohol. And I am an indie author and I write books that I call recovery-friendly fiction. And I also write some nonfiction, but primarily I write recovery-friendly speculative fiction that I'll get into a little bit later about what that covers. So would you like to hear more of like the big backstory?
Yeah, tell us how you got to where you are and a little more of your journey. Absolutely, please.
I was born in Vermont, and a lot of people hear Vermont and they think liberal state, but actually my parents were very conservative. I was uh, raised evangelical. I was independent fundamentalist Baptist IFB, which is, if you're not familiar with that, that's what the Duggar family is.
Yep.
Um, so my childhood, I was homeschooled. I was very secluded and cut off from things. I had times of my life where, I had to wear the skirts and only and all of that. And my father was an alcoholic. So he was not abusive, but he was an alcoholic. And if you're familiar with how that impacts a person and how that affects people to be an adult child of an alcoholic, that it's definitely had an impact. And then my mother was abusive emotionally, physically, spiritually, although a lot of the spiritual abuse came from the IFB church that I was baptized into. And the alcoholism was definitely generational. I watched my grandfather die from liver failure when I was 5 years old. I distinctly remember the color yellow he was when I went to say goodbye to him. And so I grew up seeing all of the people in my life drinking, and I said I was never going to drink because I knew that it would be a problem. And of course, that's clearly not what ended up happening.
Right.
So, I I got permission to go to public high school sophomore year. I had gone to a fundamentalist private school in between from sixth grade to ninth grade. I did, which was good. It got me more out from underneath my mother. Um, and I had the goal I wanted to go to college, which was supported by my father, which was unusual in that culture.
I was going to say that's surprising. Typically, in those very fundamental cults, women getting education is not accepted.
Yeah. And it yeah, he was always very supportive of it. He had a high school diploma, my mother had a high school diploma, so it was definitely a first generation thing. My brother went to college, but then he by the time I was going to college, because he's 5 years older than me, he had dropped out before finishing.
Mm.
So I do think some of it may have been wanting somebody to go to college and finish. But I'm not sure. And so I did have to push back. My father was again very supportive of wherever I wanted to go for the most part. My mother's side of the family really wanted me to go to like a Christian college. I did not want to. I wanted to go to a mainstream college. So I ended up going to Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. It's a liberal arts college that was founded to provide a safe place for Jewish people to go because it gives off all the Jewish holidays. So it was predominantly Jewish. Over 50% Jewish when I went there. I don't know what it is now. I know that they've been actively trying to adjust the demographics a little bit to be more diverse.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a huge culture shock for me, even definitely.
I can't even imagine to go from fundamental Christian to predominantly Jewish.
Yes. And when I was in high school too, I should mention that my parents also had a very dramatic divorce when I was in high school because my mother cheated on my father and my father found out, and like the only reason you can get divorced in fundamentalist circles is because of adultery. So there are some groups that also allow for abuse, but not the one that I grew up in. So he divorced her. It was like I think it was just like finally a reason for him to
Yeah.
be able to. So, and after that, she started exploring a wide variety of other religions, and I just consistently at that point I went to a charismatic church, which is like if you've ever seen like Jesus Camp, the documentary, like where people speak in tongues. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was what I did for rebellion in high school, was I went to the charismatic church. We stopped just short of Holden Snakes. So I went from that to the Jewish college. And the first 2 years, like I did not party. I didn't like get into anything. It was very overwhelming. It was very difficult for me to fit in. I am not diagnosed neurodiverse, but I do think I may be. Like I struggle, but it's hard to tell because of how isolated my childhood was, like how much is just how I was raised and how much is how I am.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was like a difficult time. I my junior year, I that the summer between my sophomore year and my junior year, I just decided that I don't know. I just had this moment where I was like, I'm tired of living this way. I want to be more normal, scare quotes normal. And when I got back to college that fall, one of my friends invited me to a party, and I just said, yeah, I would go. And I'd never really gone before. And I kissed someone at this party, and they had been drinking vodka, and I thought it tasted delicious.
Uh,
And that was it. That was when I started drinking. And everyone's always surprised that I thought it tasted good because most people don't think hard liquor tastes good. But I thought it was like one of the best things I'd ever tasted. And that was when I started drinking and partying. And those 2 years of college, it wasn't as an adult who works in recovery, I would say it was problem drinking, but it was within the realm of normal for everyone I was hanging out with and doing college things with. Like there was definitely binge drinking happening. There was definitely things like that going on, but it was definitely within the realm of what everyone else was doing. It was definitely like a weekend warrior thing. It was like not every day. It was at parties, it was with other people. It wasn't like anything like that. And this was also a difficult time for me because this is when I started to figure out that I was queer. And I obviously this was a problem in my family, but like also to give people context, because if you're listening, you have no idea how old I am. Like I grew up during the whole big fight about whether queer people can get married, whether same-sex
yeah.
people can get married. And also for me, I grew up hearing you could be straight or you could be a lesbian. And there was nothing else. And I am bisexual. And I was very confused by how I was feeling because I could tell that I wasn't a lesbian. I was like, I'm attracted to men. But I definitely had feelings about my friends that were
Mhm.
not what a straight girl would feel. So I came out when I came out to my friends, they said, "Yeah, we know." Um,
Generally, the people closest to us have an idea already. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when I came out to my friends, they said, "Yeah, we know." And when I came out to my mother, that obviously went terribly.
Yeah.
Yeah, she told me I was going to hell. It was like the whole thing. I never actually came out to my father. And because it went so badly coming out to my mother, I just didn't want to mess up the relationship with my father. Um, and yeah, so then I graduated and then I moved to Boston and I started going to grad school for my master's degree in library science. And grad school is when the drinking really took a bad turn. And I also, grad school is a terrible thing. It's not, it doesn't cultivate mental health.
No, no, I'm with you on that one. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a studio apartment by myself in the city. I got into a relationship that was n not healthy for either of us. Um, and I started drinking much more heavily and much more often and often alone. And I started to just feel this weight like of exhaustion, depression, like I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't sleep. I ended up doing EAP through work. I was working full time and doing grad school part time. I did EAP through work. I guess I did that after I graduated with my master's because I wasn't able to sleep, and so I was frequently late to work, and I wanted to protect my job.
I'm just
And
going to jump in really quick, Amanda. EAP, for anybody listening that isn't aware, your workplace doesn't offer it. It's employee assisted
program.
program. Yeah, it's where work companies will provide options for mental health resources for you. Not everybody has that option. So EAP is you can see a therapist through your work.
And at my job, because I worked in academia, it also protected your job. If you had sought help, they couldn't fire you for the problem that the therapist identified as being a result of whatever was going on. So that's why I went. That is the only reason I went.
You know what? That sometimes is all it takes to motivate someone. I mean, it's something that basic to motivate someone to start to make a change is I don't want to lose my job. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that therapist diagnosed me with PTSD. I think in modern times, I would probably be diagnosed with CPTSD, most likely, but that wasn't a thing when
Yeah.
I went. Yeah. And so that I started working with her, and I guess 2 years before that, I had gone on no contact with my mother. Shortly, I think after my first year of grad school, I went no contact with my mother. Um, and so yeah, I even though I was in therapy and I was working on things, I somehow managed to hide the drinking from her. I don't know how, but she never really asked. It never really came up. Um, I don't think I was actively hiding it intentionally. It's just that like it she never asked and I didn't really think of it as a big problem, I
Mhm.
guess. And so in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that whole thing would have been so much better if she had just asked me. But she never really did. We worked a lot on the sleeping and healthier coping and dealing with flashbacks and things like that. And that did help. And like we worked a lot on my interpersonal relationships and not repeating the patterns I'd seen growing up between my parents and healthier dating. And it was at this point that I met my now husband. And that was great because, like, I don't think that that would have ever gone the way it did if I hadn't been in therapy.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was still drinking through all of this, and I was drinking when I met him. So, anyway, so we met, we got pretty serious with each other. Um, he moved in with me a year after we were dating, which was a little bit of a thing because I felt very negatively on living together before you get married. Still, I felt like it was they'll never marry you if
Yeah.
you together. Um, so we agreed to do it for a year, and that he was like, at that point, we'll talk about like next steps. And I was like, okay. Um, and I when I met him, um, I had a couple of times where I would stop drinking for a month because of something that happened where I had done something. I never I never ever cheated or anything like that, but it was like I would drink too much and I would just be like, that difficult drunk person you don't want to deal with,
Yeah.
like throwing up and like ruining the weekend and like It's like it's just not a fun, that's not the fun person to be around. Anyone who's been around a person who's drunk too much alcohol knows that's not a fun person to be around.
Right.
Um, and of course, I tended to be like either sad or angry when I drank too much because of the trauma I had not dealt with. And that's just not a fun person to be around either. So there were a few times that I would quit drinking for a month and then I would be like, I can moderate now. I'm not going to drink too much. But it always went right back to, and when I, to be clear to people who like don't know what I'm talking about, like it was like a daily drinking habit, like of at least 4 drinks a day, which is a lot for a woman. Like that is a lot for a woman. And I would like drink that much and not be blackout drunk. Like 4 was
Yeah.
maintenance.
Didn't have those four, you would start to go into the withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I would not be able to sleep. I would feel shaky. I would like have all of those things happen. And so it's interesting to me that these things were still going on because my true bottom happened before this. So before I met my husband, so after I graduated from undergrad, I was in grad school. No, I had just graduated grad school. Um, I truly hit my worst bottom. I was so depressed and I felt like I had nobody, like nobody in the world. I felt like I had absolutely nobody. Nobody understood me. Nobody was my friend. And I will not go into the details because I know research says you should not. But I did try to take my own life.
Hmm.
And I woke up the next morning on the floor with my cat next to me. And she was sleeping right up next to me and licking me. And I looked it up and I heard the voice of God say, literally, I heard the voice of God say, you don't get to make that decision. And
Wow.
I looked it up later and I should not be here. Like I should not, what I did should have not worked.
Right.
So I felt very strongly that God had stepped in and said no. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to get my ish together. And it was shortly after that I went to therapy. Well, you would think that would mean that I would, I think people who are not familiar with what a person who has dealt with addiction would hear that and say, okay, that was it, you were done. And it wasn't, even though my intentions were very strong that I needed to get it together and be okay. It wasn't that easy.
Hmm.
Like I never had anything that low again, but I kept the addiction brain kept telling me I could moderate
Yes.
and I couldn't. But my brain kept telling the addiction told me I could because the addiction does not want to let you go.
No.
The addiction is fine with you ruining your life, ruining your relationships. It is it is absolutely fine with that. So fast forward, was in this awful, awful cycle, which now as a peer supporter, I see other people going through, and it's so frustrating. It was frustrating when you're doing it, and it's frustrating when you watch other people do it. I would say, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to be good. I would be sober for a month, and then I would say, I can moderate. I can have a drink with a friend on a Friday night, and then I would escalate back up to just as bad as it had been before. Repeated cycle, for years.
Yeah.
Repeated for years. And my husband and I got married, and at my wedding, my father came to my wedding. He did not look good. He was 57, 58 years old. He looked much older. We found him throwing up the morning after our wedding, like very unpleasant looking. And I was worried about him, but he also had heart disease. Um, and he had a pacemaker, and he always told me it's the side effect of the medication I'm on. So we went on our honeymoon, and 7 weeks later, my brother called me and told me that my dad had had another heart attack. He'd had heart attacks 2 or 3 times between when I was in like that last 10 years. Um, and I was like, okay. He was like, he's going to the hospital. I was like, okay. Um, and he told me to just go to bed. I was like, all right. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning to a call from my brother to call him back, and I called him back, and he was gone.
Wow.
And he was 58 years old. And we went up. Sorry, this is still really hard for me to talk about. We went up to Vermont, to deal with everything we needed to deal with. And he was living in a trailer park, and his trailer was awful. If anyone's ever seen what a late stage alcoholic's living situation looks like. They all look like this. Like, and it was just a mess. Like, just because they can't executive function, take care of themselves properly. And my brother at this point was about 6 months sober because he'd done inpatient rehab about 6 months before, and I was surprised at how different he was, personality wise, I mean.
Really?
Yeah, he was so much more patient and kind, and I was really surprised. Like, if you're listening to this, brother, like I know that was always there, and I know what they did. Very good relationship. But anyway, so that was really, really difficult to deal with. And then I forget how long, I had this thing in my brain, that seed in my brain that started going, pay attention to what you're looking at here. And we had all been like, oh, he died from heart disease. We got the death certificate. If you've never lost someone that close to you, you don't know, you get a death certificate, the official death certificate when you're the close family member. And it spelled out, like in a line, like the cause of death, but then everything that led to the cause of death. Like it was literally like a flow chart.
Hmm.
And so it said, like, I forget the medical term for it, but like it was acute myocardial infarction, like yeah. It said acute myocardial infarction, and then it like went down the whole line, and at the very bottom of the list it said like long-term alcoholism was the cause of death. And I was like, what? Like the more we dug into it in the medical records and stuff, we found out he wasn't supposed to be drinking any alcohol with his medications that he was on, that the doctors had told him that many, many times, how like that the side effects we were seeing weren't like normal side effects for the medication if you don't drink while you're on them. And so that was in November, and I said, I can't do this to myself. I can't do this to my husband. I can't do this to my brother, my nephews, or my niece, my my friends. I
Yeah.
can't I can't do this. I can't make them do this. I would not inflict what I just went through on anybody else. I'm just I need to be real honest with myself that I can't drink because it never is one drink.
Right.
And I decided I was going to quit. And I set a timeline for myself because at the other addicts will understand. I was like, I can't quit drinking during the holidays.
Yeah, yeah. When after my birthday or after, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
So I said I'm going to do it January 1st at like 12:05. I'm going to let myself have a glass of champagne, and then that's going to be it. That's going to be the last thing. And that is still my sobriety date. That is like what,
Wow.
and I will say, to be very clear to people, because we talked a lot about how much I drank. I tapered very slowly down between November and December. It is really dangerous to just suddenly stop drinking if you've been drinking as much as I had been. I really should have gotten medical advice on it. I did not because I was a dumb 29-year-old. Um, but and I was safe though, because by the time I stopped, I was having like one drink a day, if that. I don't
Okay, so
think daily drinking.
I'm
Yeah.
going to jump in and reiterate what Amanda's saying. If you are someone who's struggling with substance abuse, any substance abuse, yes, alcohol and any other ones, pills, narcotics, benzos, or anti-anxiety medicine, anything like that, definitely come off it with physician support because they are there. There can be and are generally with most of those life-threatening side effects that will happen if you come off them too quickly, too fast. So 100% if you are on any sort of substance and you want to come off it, do it with the help of a medical professional because you can't be trying to save your life and end up doing more harm than good because
Yeah.
of the side effects of coming off something you've been addicted to.
Yes. People have died from trying
Absolutely.
it on their own. Like it
Mhm.
is, and I know that's hard because it's like really embarrassing to like ask for help, especially because you doubt yourself that you're going to do it, and then you're like, oh, I'm letting somebody down, blah de blah. I know it's really scary to talk to someone about it. I was crazy private about it, but you really should. And like try, even if you like, if you can find one person to talk to who you could bring with you, like that makes it less scary. Yeah, but you do need to. I was lucky. Um, So yeah, so I quit, and people often ask like, "Oh, you did a group, you did this, you did rehab." No, I read books. I read books and I listened to podcasts.
Mm,
So yeah, I read a lot of what people call quit lit. So I read Blackout by Sarah Hepola. It's a really great book. I read This Naked Mind, which really, really flipped another switch. There was a switch that was flipped when my dad died, and there was another switch that was flipped when I read This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. That really, it made me see alcohol differently. Um, and like scientifically differently. It made me see how much I was inflicting harm on my body every time I drank. And a lot more has come out since that book.
yeah.
Yeah, about that, especially for women, people in bodies assigned female. So I listened to a bunch of podcasts, and I engaged a lot with Reddit Stop Drinking subreddit, which is a really great subreddit, very supportive. If I felt like the urge to drink, I would post there and people would give me support and ideas of what I could do differently. They were the people who told me to go home, commute home a different route than I used to, so I wouldn't go by the liquor store
Uh,
anymore, because that was a big triggering moment in my day for me, was the commute home from work, because I didn't know. It sounds so dumb to say now this. I didn't know what I was to do with myself in the evenings after work back then.
do you know what? I actually hear that a lot from people who are quitting smoking. They don't know what to do with their hands. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a real thing. You don't know what to do with yourself.
So in amongst all of this, so while in my early 20s, like my big goal had been to be an author, and I wrote two books, but I only wrote when I was drunk. And I think that I know I shouldn't say I think there is a very toxic culture in the writing community that you got to drink to write well. And like all the good writers were drunks, and this and that and the other thing. And so I only wrote when I was drinking. And I think a large part of that was like I couldn't deal with the traumas that were coming up when I was writing, because the way I write is I will write about things I know, of course, and a lot of what I knew was trauma. And so that was really difficult. And when I quit drinking, I said to myself, I'm not going to be able to write. Well, I probably am not going to be able to write. I don't think I'm going to be able to write. And I just accepted that, which tells you like, if this was like my big dream. So like the fact that I was willing to just be like, okay, I might not be able to write, like that was a big deal. So that was, I forget the exact year that was, but that was at least a few years before the pandemic. And when the pandemic came, I got sent to work remotely with my husband in a studio apartment. It was a lot, and I know everyone had different pandemic experience. Boston was very strict and serious about it. There wasn't a lot you could do, places you could go. You couldn't go to restaurants. You couldn't like go to the gym. It was very, very large change. And I actually wasn't triggered to drink at all, because I was like, this drinking is not going to make the situation better. So, um,
Yeah.
So, part way into the pandemic, I saw this call because there was all that stuff happening online. I saw this call from this New York City women and queer-owned theater production company, saying they wanted to do a monologue marathon on Instagram, and they needed people to write the monologues in order to be able to shoot them legally. I got this, I don't know how I got this idea in my head, but I got this idea in my head that I was gonna write them. I was like, I may as well try writing a monologue for this. It's a 5 minute or less monologue. That's not a lot of writing. What could it hurt? And I ended up, and during the pandemic also, I started attending some online recovery meetings, not for myself, but to support other people, because I knew a lot of people were having a hard time. And so I attended some of those. And so I'd seen a lot of people talk, new people talking in group. So I wrote a monologue of a woman who's coming to an online group for the first time, and wants to quit. And I was completely shocked that I got accepted. They loved it. They were like, "This is one of our favorite monologues. It's been,"
Wow.
and I'm still friends with the actress who played the part at the time. Her name is Casey Marie Ecker. She's really talented. And I was like, wait, maybe I can write sober. Maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
So I started writing again. I wrote a lot of short stories and I submitted them, and they started getting accepted, and I was blown away. Um, And then I started to feel this feeling in my gut. I had published the two books I had written while I was drinking, and I was like, I gotta reread these. And I reread them, and I was like, oh God, both of it's not that they were bad books, but both of the female main characters were so obviously alcoholics. Like, obviously. So I decided I was going to rewrite them and make them recovery friendly. So the first book is Waiting for Daybreak, and Waiting for that was the first one I rewrote because it was the one that meant the most to me. And so originally this had been a book, like my whole idea was this was a book about a woman with borderline personality disorder, and I got that because I had been working at a mental hospital, so I that has done a lot of work on borderline personality disorder. People in the know will know what hospital I'm talking about. And I felt really bad for these women for how maligned they are. And I decided I was going to make the main character of my book have that disorder and be the heroine, and
Yeah.
overcome it herself. And I had her deal with her BPD quite well, but her alcoholism was just like, so I rewrote that book so that she also gets sober over the course of the book. I inserted all of my books now have a content note at the beginning. There's two forms. There's a short one that's a lot like a movie one that says, PG, PG-13, like sex, language, violence, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then there's also a longer one for people who have very specific triggers that so you can engage whichever one you want. I know some people feel like trigger warnings are spoilers. You can skip the long list and read the short one. You can do the other way around, whatever you want. So that's one of the ways in which my books are recovery friendly is that they all start with a content note. Um, and so I inserted that. I did the rewrite, and I put out the second edition, and it's been very, very well received. A lot of women, especially, say, they don't usually like zombie books, but they love that book. Um, and then I also did for my paranormal romance book, Ecstatic Evil, I decided that I just wanted it to just be a universe without substances,
Mm.
with no explanation for that, because why should I have to explain this? And the reasoning for this, some of that came from my involvement as a queer person in the queer community. A lot of times when people read books about queer people, they say, oh, it's so unrealistic that everybody they know is queer. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's my life. A lot of my friends are queer. Of course they are. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
You surround yourself with like-minded people. Yeah.
And like you seek out people who understand you, and
Yes.
like it's and I was like, my world as a person in recovery is very devoid of alcohol and substances. It's not everywhere I go. I am a person who is able to go to a bar for karaoke and not drink, and it's not a big deal, but not everyone does.
Right.
There's no reason why I can't tell a story, and especially for people early in recovery, it can be triggering to read about a character drinking like a glass of whiskey
Yeah.
or a glad bottle of wine or whatever. And I was like, let me write a paranormal romance where there just isn't any of that and there's no explanation for it. No one's sober, no one has a big dramatic backstory. It's just that this main character eats gummy bears when she's a little stressed out. Like, and there's no explanation for it. She brews people a cup of tea. Like, there's no scenes in a bar. Like, it's just
It doesn't
that
even have to be discussed. It just isn't a thing.
it's just not a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that has been, I wrote another book after I got sober, called Bloomcha, which is that was inspired by, as a queer person, my queer friends have started having kids, and I wanted to write one of my fairy tales that was queer, that one of my favorite fairy tales from childhood to be queer inclusive. So I rewrote Thumbelina, which you can tell again when I grew up because Thumbelina was a big hit in the 90s, early 90s. So I rewrote Thumbelina as a space fantasy set on the planet Venus. And Thumbelina is Bloomcha in the story. And she has a mom and a non-binary parent. And like there's also she has her first baby romance is with a genderless alien on Venus because the Venus aliens are completely agender. So the Bloomch is really pansexual, I would say. I would identify her as. And yeah, so I did that. That book means a lot to me. It has not been as well reviewed as my other two books, but I do think a lot of that has to do with how queer it is. It also is like kind of, even though I'm like, oh, it's space fantasy, it's pretty literary, like, and not everyone not everyone loves a literary queer. I really like weird queer literature, and I'm glad I wrote one. But just like my other books, there's no substances in this book at all. It has a content note. It's like it is a completely a safe story to read because there's no you're not going to encounter any of that in there. Yeah, and so that's where where things have ended up.
That, oh my gosh, what an incredible story. And you've talked about so many things that I want to jump into. And first of all, I want to talk about, if you're okay, what a stark contrast between when your dad passed. And by the way, I'm so sorry, that sounds incredibly difficult. The seeing how it was with your dad, end stage liver failure, end stage, chronic alcoholism, and your brother having been sober. Yeah, and that contrast, what a pretty powerful motivator.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I never really thought about that. How, because I had seen my brother briefly at our wedding, but that was different because it was like like obviously I wasn't thinking that much about my
Yeah.
brother at my wedding. But I hadn't
Yeah.
really seen him. I knew he had gone to rehab and he had told me how bad things had been. That's his story. But so I knew about that. But this was like my first extended interaction with him, just between, not really one on one because my husband was there too, but
Right.
the three of us, because my sister-in-law was taking care of the children. That was a really very, you're right, that was a very stark contrast.
To see end stage, alcohol killed in one instance, and then your brother who had just gotten sober. What a pretty powerful kind of aha moment. And then the other thing I want to talk about is I love that. Well, two things. First of all, you talked about how you felt like you weren't going to be able to write sober. And that's trauma brain, that's addict brain lying to us to keep us where we are. And yet you were able to write and you've been able to write these amazing things. And so, just learning how, and that our brain telling us things isn't necessarily true. We get to shape what that reality is.
Yeah.
But then to say, or I want to say, how amazing that you saw a need in your community, queer women, out, recovering alcoholics, and not having literature that you felt like represented who you were. And so you created something in a space where there wasn't anything. And that I think is the sign to me, that's the sign of somebody who is healing. You see a need, and if there's not something out there, you create it. You are an incredible being. So I guess I'm talking to you, yes, Amanda, and everyone else listening, that if you find a need when you're on your journey and it's not something there, you get to create it. That's what I did with play and movement. I needed something in my body that wasn't out there, and I looked and I looked and I looked, and I didn't find anything. So I developed the way of play and movement that I did because there was something lacking. And so I think that is something that I resonate with. And I also see as a glimmer of hope that if you're not finding what you need out there, create it. You get to create it. The world's waiting for someone like you to create it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And like, I think everyone has something unique and special to bring
Yes.
to the world. And you can't do that if you're not healing yourself and if you're in active addiction. You simply cannot. Like, I think I can name many things that my father did not get to bring to the world because of the time he lost to drinking that I know he could have done. And and I think sometimes I try not to get caught into this because they tell you not to. But the number of years that I lost in the books I could have written when I was in active addiction is very large, and that's true of every single person. That you have something in you. And I'm a big reader, and when I first got sober, like I said, I switched to quit lit and nonfiction and podcasts because I didn't feel safe necessarily reading the fictional books because there was
Mhm.
just, at least in the nonfiction and the quitlet and stuff, like, yes, there were drinking scenes, but it was all in the context of this was terrible and I shouldn't have been doing it and this is how I got better. It wasn't like in that like romanticized way you often see in literature.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been through a whole lot of terrible, terrible trauma and incredible hardships. What helped you to keep going, to find the will to keep going? Because that's really hard when you're in trauma, when you're in addiction, when you're in that pit of despair, kind of that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this a little bit, but I mean, it was to me, it was God. So, I think sometimes people are surprised that I'm still a faithful person, like because I'm a queer person and I had the very traumatic religious experience growing up, and it was a very long journey that would be its own whole other story
Right,
and podcast.
right.
But I actually it was a big healing journey, and it started with that attempt in the voice of God. I February of this year, I became a member of the PCUSA, which is the Presbyterian Church of the United States. It's a progressive Christian church, very closely aligned to, if you saw the Episcopalian woman priest who like talked down, who at the,
Yeah.
I don't know, we can not get blocked for saying, at the big inauguration, very similarly aligned, very progressive social justice values. We have a woman pastor. There's a gay man who's like a deacon in the church. Like, they had a lesbian wedding the year before I
Mhm.
started going to the church. So I'm getting to the answer to your question because it's very tied to my faith.
Yeah.
So Presbyterians believe in predestination, which is the idea that that predestines our lives. And it is my belief that it is not me that made me survive the trauma, that it was God, and especially the Holy Spirit. Like, I feel that the Holy Spirit spoke to me when I got too far off what I
Mhm.
was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't a constant thing, to be clear to people. Like, I'm not constantly here. It was that one time.
Right.
And and it's difficult to explain to people who don't share the same faith, but I feel that anytime I'm struggling to feel the strength to do something, that I ask for God's help and God gives me the strength. And um, you know, and I get the nudges and sometimes pushes from God that like I feel like my father passing and seeing that death certificate was a big push, and that I wasn't following the path I was supposed to be following. And so when things get hard, like there's been like quite a few things that have been very hard in the last 5 years in my life. Like, I have a long COVID diagnosis.
Mm.
Like, have been very difficult things. I went from running Ks, like that was a big thing I did for my recovery. I would like go out for runs. I would run
Yeah.
5. I was starting to build up to do like 5 miler, and I suddenly like I couldn't if I went up and down. If I took the groceries in up to our third floor walk up, I couldn't do anything else that day.
Wow.
In times like that, like it was me praying. Like, I prayed fervently. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's I have like two basic beliefs, and it's like one is that I was just telling this to one of my uh sponsees, my
Hmm.
aren't in the community. When you are new in recovery, a lot of times you can get a sponsor who's in long-term recovery who talks to you, And I was just telling her that number one in your life has to be your sobriety. Like, it
Hmm.
has to be. If you have to not go to that family gathering because it will make you use or drink, then you don't go. If you have to quit your job because your job makes you drink, then you quit your job. Like, you have to prefer to be unhoused and sober than to be in a mansion and drunk. That is
Wow.
what I have to prefer. And so that's number one. And then number two is, because I am a woman of faith, like really my sobriety comes second after God. So it's God and then my sobriety.
Yeah.
And I try to respond to any situation or challenge or trial the way that I feel my social justice inspired inspiration of God would say that I should. And I tell you, it's never go get drunk.
Yeah.
It's never go have a pity party for yourself. It's what can you do for somebody else?
Yes.
And a lot of time, like when I first got my long COVID diagnosis, I had a real struggle with I have to take care of myself first.
That's
Yeah,
incredibly challenging, especially for trauma survivors,
yeah,
to put yourself in front of anyone else or to even believe that you get to have needs or wants.
yeah. If I'm gonna heal from the long COVID, which I do believe that we can, from what I have seen, and then from what I've seen in myself and in others, you have to rest, and that was hard.
I'm going to say that for healing from any type of trauma. And long COVID is trauma in your body. And I'm also going to say emotional trauma is the same. You have to rest. If you keep pushing, then you're never going to heal. Same with addiction, with recovering from addiction. And so, oh my gosh, Amanda, so powerful, incredible. Amazing. I'm blown away by your story. And okay, so I'm going to ask you the two questions I ask everybody.
Yes.
Or what would you say was one of your biggest challenges as you were on your healing journey?
I know you told me this at the beginning, and then I didn't actually take the time to think. Um, Biggest challenge in my healing journey. All right. I think so. In addiction recovery, we learn that your addiction can hop, and what that means is, if you stop using one thing,
Mm,
you can still develop an addiction to something else, especially something more societally acceptable. And for me, that was workaholism,
mm,
early sobriety, and I definitely made some big mistakes where I'm like, oh, that time that I wasted of my short life, because I feel very much like life is short after my father passing so young. I'm like, that time I wasted my short life doing this stupid stuff for work. And I wish I had been more aware and alert to the fact that your addiction will try to hop to something else, and it will especially try to hop to something societally acceptable. Workaholism is a huge one. Exercise is another one
yes.
that pops up for a lot of people in early sobriety. They will over exercise. It will become an addiction. Sugar is a huge one.
Mm.
Not that there's anything wrong with sugar, not to demonize it, but anything can become a problem if it's something you must do every day, besides like sleep. And
Right. Right. But even at that, sometimes you can even become addicted to sleep and not ever
yes,
do anything. So
yeah,
it's kind of this idea of anything is good, fine, whatever, as long as it's not controlling your life.
yes. Learning that I needed to be alert and aware of that and constantly be forcing myself to find the middle ground and the moderation ground. That is something that I have to be constantly on alert for. And I wish I had realized that earlier.
I know you're talking specifically addiction. That I feel that in my bones in terms of healing from trauma. Absolutely. I wanted to escape healing from trauma. And so I did overwork. I did travel. I became addicted to travel and, things.
That's another societally acceptable one. Yeah.
And I became addicted to travel, and that's kind of expensive. And so, it can show up in any way. So be conscientious of it and not just talking about substance addiction. It can be addiction to anything. I
Shopping
love
is
it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What? Oh,
the
shopping. You
shopping.
said shopping.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. So just be conscientious and don't be too hard on yourself. Just start to explore. Is this becoming unhealthy for me, or is this something that I maybe need to look at? Okay, so my next question is if we could sit down and talk in 12 months, where would you want to be that you're not now?
I would love to be a full-time author and content creator. Like that is not that I don't love and appreciate my job and my work, but that is where my true passion lies. And I would rather be able for my recovery work to be like volunteering
Yeah.
a few hours a week as opposed to being like, we all got to make the money. So, I mean, I do appreciate, like I said, I appreciate the work and I appreciate the recovery field very much, but my true passion lies in writing and always has. So,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure we're going to see tons of amazing books, more books come from you. So, now I understand you have a free gift for everybody.
Yeah, so I have a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for, and every month you get a free piece of short fiction. So that's fiction of less than 1,000 words. That'll come right to your inbox along with, any relevant updates from me about, what else I have coming out and going on. And also that newsletter also gives you an alert if I'm part of any free giveaways or, a lot of times indie authors will do like a couple of day event where like our ebooks are free. And so you'll get a notice if that comes up and you'll be able to do downloads. And also from all the other great indie authors in the pile. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll drop that link down in the show notes. So go sign up, get the short fiction, especially if you feel like literature out there already doesn't represent who you are, or you find that maybe you are finding reading non-recovery friendly literature is triggering for you. So go check her out. Go sign up for it. The link is in the show notes. Also, I'm in the show notes. I've dropped a link. I have a free, short, less than 5 minute movement sequence that you can do when you're feeling that emotional itchiness that you don't quite know what to do with. You need to release so that you can step into what it is that you want to do, especially as you are trying to heal from any type of recovery, trauma, addiction, anything like that. It's a great way to release that pressure valve of discomfort as you're letting go and healing. So go grab that in the show notes as well. Now, Amanda, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or follow you on social media?
Absolutely. So my website is opinionsofawolf.com. That links to like I decided not to give up what my 20-something-year-old decided for her website early on. I do think part of recovery is embracing who you were as well, like the good parts.
Yes.
So opinionsofawolf.com, that links to my books, to my podcast, to I have book reviews. All of my book reviews call out trigger warnings and any appearance of substances and things like that. So that's helpful too if you're a big reader. And then my Instagram is where I am the most active on social media. That is also at Opinions of a Wolf. I'm double checking. Yes, it's at Opinions of a Wolf. I was like, is it?
We'll drop all those links in the show notes. So definitely go check Amanda out, go follow her, reach out, connect with her if you're struggling, especially with addictions. She's an amazing resource. And if you don't find that you're represented in something, reach out to her and she can help you figure out how to find a way to represent yourself. She's an incredible story of that. So thank you, Amanda, so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story and for being vulnerable with us and sharing the difficult parts of your story with us, as well as all of it. And thank you for inspiring us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Angie.
All right. Thanks for being here. And everybody else, thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm wishing you tons of play and fun and lightness on your healing journey. Bye, everybody.